I was seated calmly at the table beside my 7-year-old grandson during my son's second marriage ceremony. All of a sudden, the child clutched my hand firmly and murmured, "Grandma, I need to go away immediately." I inquired, "What's the matter?" He shook and answered, "Grandma, you haven't checked beneath the table, have you?" I gradually shifted my eyes downward and stiffened. I grasped my grandson's hand, and we rose quietly. "I'm so thankful you're watching. If you're viewing this clip, kindly give it a thumbs up. If you like this, please like my video and subscribe my channel and join the channel. Then share in the comments the location from which you're hearing my tale of retribution. I'd love to see how widespread it has become. I was positioned in the center of the reception venue, a grand room illuminated by candles, right alongside my cherished grandson, the child I adore beyond everything. This day marked the marriage of my son, Alex, to his second spouse, Ava. My young boy, Leo, was occupied sliding his red toy vehicle to and fro over the spotless white linen. His bright eyes appeared, lost in his personal realm, where the chatter of the grown-ups surrounding him was non-existent. I gazed at him, and my emotions warmed. I gently adjusted the small bow tie around his collar, a motion as soft as though I were touching the recollection of his mom, Maria, whose each gentle grin I recall as vividly as if it happened today. The gentle tune from the jazz ensemble permeated the space, merging with the hum of discussions and the tinkling of goblets. The venue was adorned with remarkable elegance, featuring displays of pure white roses at each spot, and the candle glow bouncing off the shiny silver dishes. I glanced upward in search of Alex. He was occupied moving among the tables, raising toasts to express gratitude to the attendees, with a beaming grin that appeared to conceal the void I knew lingered in his soul since Maria departed. Far off, Ava, my son's fresh bride, striking in her embellished bridal gown, was captured in pictures with her companions. Her grin was flawless, devoid of any shadow, as though the entire universe was hers. I stared at her and sensed an odd feeling in my breast, a peculiar vibe, but I attempted to dismiss it, convincing myself I was merely overly emotional. Servers glided smoothly among the spots, pouring additional wine, removing cleared dishes, and folding the linens. An older pair at our table faced me with a warm grin. "How quickly Leo is maturing. What's his age now, Betty?" I grinned and responded quietly. "He recently became 7. The years pass swiftly." Then I shifted to slice a tiny portion of cake for Leo. The child glanced upward, his gaze sparkling with thanks, but he promptly dropped his head once more and kept sliding his toy vehicle as though only that plaything offered him security. Abruptly, Leo halted. His small hands ceased moving the car, and his wide eyes stared at me with an unusual gravity for his age. I felt a bit alarmed. A negative sensation coursed through me. He seized my hand tightly. His tiny digits were freezing. In a hurried tone, he murmured, "Grandma, I need to depart immediately." His tone quivered as though he was suppressing a terror he couldn't articulate. My pulse quickened. I bent toward him and rested a hand on his arm. "What's the issue, my dear? Share with me what's happening." Leo quivered, sealing his mouth. And then he murmured so faintly that I needed to bring my ear nearer to catch it. "Grandma, you haven't peeked under the table, right?" His statement felt like a chilling blade piercing my breast. A dreadful distress started to swell within me, rendering breathing difficult. I attempted to remain composed and smoothed his locks, but his stare, the frightened expression of a mere 7-year-old, stopped me from disregarding it. "Everything's fine, my darling. Allow Grandma to check," I stated, attempting to keep my tone steady to comfort him, though my own pulse was racing. Cautiously, I raised the border of the white linen and peered into the shadowy area beneath the table, where the chair's wooden supports and Leo's small footwear were dangling. And then I spotted it. A tiny sheet of paper creased into quarters, resting there, directly beside Leo's seat. It was so minuscule that it nearly vanished in the gloom, but its existence froze my veins. Leo snuggled closer to me, his small hand clasping my limb as though searching for shelter. I sensed his rapid breaths. Each shake appeared to indicate that something was gravely amiss. I bent down fully, and with a shaky hand, I retrieved the paper. The folks nearby were still chuckling and raising glasses. But in that moment, my whole universe contracted to just me, Leo, and that cursed sheet in my grasp. I opened it. The faint candle illumination on the surface was sufficient to decipher the jotted notes. Table 8 includes shrimp in the kids' portion. A handful of terms, but they struck like a sharp blow to my core. I sensed the blood chill in my vessels and the breath catch in my lungs. Leo has a serious allergy to shrimp, a fact my entire kin knows well. Even one bit of shrimp could endanger his existence. Who might have penned this? Who could be so vicious? Precisely on the day of my son's nuptials, I gripped Leo's hand, sensing his small fingers shake within mine. I rose suddenly, ignoring the astonished glances from those nearby. The older pair close by halted their chat and stared at me with worry. I embraced Leo with all my might, as though afraid he might disappear if I released him. The chuckles and tunes persisted, but for me, all had turned into a dense, oppressive quiet. Recollections from different eras overwhelmed my thoughts, pulling me away from that shining reception space and back to the periods when our kin was intact. I once believed my son's residence would forever echo with joy. But existence, like an abrupt breeze, snuffed out that joy's spark, leaving scars that refused to mend. I recall Maria, my initial daughter-in-law, as I recall the dawn sunlight filtering through the pane at daybreak. Her grin was soft and comforting. She always made me feel embraced by a genuine daughter. Maria never elevated her tone, never did anything that concerned me. She was among those individuals who, just by gazing at them, brought you tranquility. I still recall those breezy afternoons in Phoenix's outskirts when I'd reach Alex and Maria's modest home. Leo's giggles, who had barely begun walking, resounded in the garden as he pursued a vibrant rubber sphere. Maria would be on the veranda with a container of newly gathered veggies, grinning as she observed her child. "Mom, Betty, sample. Chili I've prepared. Tell me your thoughts. she would frequently say, her tone brimming with satisfaction as she set the heated dish before me. I'd sit there savoring it and conversing with her about everyday matters while Leo scooted on the ground, holding an aged toy vehicle. But the loveliest, and also the most hurtful memory, is the evening Leo grew very ill. He suffered a high temperature. His tiny frame was scorching, and his eyes scarcely opened, with no energy even to weep. Maria cradled him as tears glided quietly down her face. "Mom, Betty, I'm terribly frightened," she murmured, her tone shaking. I sat beside her, alternating to apply moist fabrics on his brow, attempting to soothe her. "No need to fret, dear. The child is resilient. He'll recover." But inwardly, the concern burdened me like a rock. I remained awake with Maria till daybreak, when the initial sunbeams emerged and Leo's temperature finally subsided, and he dozed in his mom's embrace. Maria faced me, her eyes weary, but with a weak grin. "Thank you, Mom. Without your help, I wouldn't know how I'd manage that instant." I simply took her hand and held it firmly, as if conveying that I'd forever be present for her and for Leo. I believed this small kin would remain joyful eternally, like a melody without conclusion. But then, one doomed afternoon, all shattered. The telephone sounded while I was rinsing plates in the kitchen. The chilly tone of a law officer came over the wire. "Mrs. Williams, we are sorry to notify you that an incident has occurred." I don't recall completing the statement. I only know my hands trembled so intensely that I let a dish fall to the ground and it broke. Maria was lost instantly when a vehicle that veered out of control struck her automobile on the roadway beyond the town. I remained there immobilized, sensing the universe collapse before me. Maria's burial happened on a day of pouring rain. The droplets descended endlessly, as if the heavens wept for her too. Leo, merely 4 years old at that time, rested in my arms, bewildered, observing all with his pure eyes, not grasping what was transpiring. "Grandma, where's my mommy?" he questioned in his tiny voice. I embraced him closely, holding back my tears, and murmured, "Your mommy's in a lovely spot, my dear." But inwardly, I felt broken. Alex, my son, fell apart before the casket, his body quaking, and he couldn't utter a thing. I knew he aimed to stay strong, but his stare was vacant, as if part of his spirit had departed with Maria. Following that calamity, Alex transformed entirely. He immersed himself in his job. He'd exit the house quite early and not come back until Leo was already sleeping. I realized he was escaping, attempting to occupy that vast emptiness in his soul with unending workdays. But Leo, my unfortunate child, endured the most. He began speaking less. His stare was frequently sorrowful, as if anticipating a wonder that would restore his mother. I turned into his sole pillar. I escorted him to classes each morning and stayed by his bedside each evening to lull him. "Grandma, share a tale about my mommy," he'd often request, and I'd narrate them with a tight throat, describing the occasions Maria hummed him to slumber, how she sliced his produce into small bits to create his preferred treat. Every narrative was an effort to preserve Maria's likeness alive in Leo's thoughts and in my soul. Lucy, my adopted daughter, also grew vital during those times. With her kind soul and capable hands, she'd visit the home regularly, carrying coloring volumes or treats she'd made herself. Lucy cherished Leo as though he were her own sibling. She'd lift him, instruct him in reading, or remain for hours with him at the spot to assist with his awkward sketches. "See, Leo, your dwelling looks nicer than mine," she'd state, chuckling with her voice as bright as a chime. But occasionally, I'd notice Lucy gazing at Alex when he came into the residence quietly after a lengthy workday. It was a profound glance that held something beyond mere sibling fondness. I observed it, but I chose to remain silent. Perhaps I feared that if I raised the topic, I'd shatter the delicate balance of our remaining kin. Alex's home gradually lost its cheer, but due to Lucy and Leo, the kin's spark stayed alight, even if faintly. I did all I could to prevent that spark from extinguishing, but deep in my soul, I knew both Alex and I carried unhealed injuries. Each time I witnessed Leo dozing, I noticed Maria's traits on his small face, and my heart would hurt once more. The memory of that afternoon remains as vivid in my thoughts as if no time has elapsed. I was seated in my modest sitting area, hearing the birds chirping in the garden, with a soul brimming with blended emotions. It was the initial occasion my son Alex was introducing Ava at home. I attempted to welcome her warmly. I tried to view this young lady through a mom's eyes, who desires her son's joy again after such suffering. But deep inside, I couldn't dispel a sense of discomfort, like a chilly breeze that caused me to tremble. That afternoon, Alex showed up later than typical. I was in the cooking space, making the tacos Leo adores so much, when I heard the entrance unlock. Alex entered with an unusual shine on his face. His eyes sparkled like in his younger days when he discussed Maria with an uncontainable enthusiasm. "Mom," he stated with a tight voice, resting against the doorway, "I'd like you to encounter someone." I paused my task and looked at him, feeling somewhat anxious. "Someone important?" I questioned, trying to maintain a steady tone. Alex grinned, a grin I hadn't witnessed in ages. "Yes, you'll really enjoy her," he replied, brimming with assurance. I nodded. I dried my hands on my smock, attempting to conceal the concern that was beginning to build. Following Maria, I wasn't certain anyone could occupy the gap she created, not just for Alex, but for Leo and me too. That evening, Ava arrived. She stepped into my home in a stylish pale blue outfit, her locks neatly arranged in curls that outlined her features, and her mouth tinted a gentle crimson that bent into a grin. That grin, I have to confess, was enchanting, as if she'd practiced it to delight anyone. "Pleased to meet you, Mrs. Williams," she stated in a pleasant tone, tilting her head a bit. I returned her grin, welcomed her inside, and offered her a mug of steaming, fragrant brew. "Your place is so warm," Ava mentioned as her gaze roamed the kin photos displayed on the wall, where one showed Maria embracing a very small Leo. I nodded and expressed thanks, but her gaze stayed on that image longer than I'd prefer, and I wasn't certain if I approved. Supper proceeded in a setting that I tried to render as welcoming as feasible. I set the meals I'd readied all afternoon on the surface. Tacos enclosed in maize wraps, a dish of enchiladas with crimson sauce, and a crisp greens with mango, Leo's top choice. Alex positioned himself beside Ava, his gaze fixed on her. His delight was evident in each action. "Mom, Ava is in promotions at my firm. She's excellent at her role," he mentioned, his tone filled with admiration. Ava grinned. She handed me an enchilada with a refined but deliberate action. "Mrs. Williams, this tastes wonderful. You must show me the recipe," she stated, offering me a kind glance. I grinned and answered courteously, but a minor portion of me stayed uneasy. There was something in her manner of speaking, her laughter, that gave me the impression of observing a skillfully orchestrated performance. Leo, my grandson, sat at the table's end, unusually quiet. He, who usually chattered endlessly about lessons that evening, merely poked at his meal without raising his head once. I observed that he was dodging Ava's stare, as if attempting to conceal in a secure spot. Ava bent forward, retrieved a candy bar from her bag, and set it before Leo with a bright grin. "Here's this for you. It's delicious, Leo," she stated in a tone as sugary as if she aimed to charm him. But Leo stayed motionless, his small hands clutching his utensils, and then he just averted his face without touching the treat. I noticed a spark of dread in his eyes and felt my heart contract. Alex furrowed his brow, ready to reprimand his child. "Leo, what's with you? Ava's offering you a sweet." I swiftly stepped in. "It's no big deal. He's likely a bit weary." "Let him be, son." Alex exhaled, but said nothing more and shifted to pour Ava additional wine, as if aiming to ease the atmosphere. Lucy, my adopted daughter, was present at supper too. She sat opposite me, dining quietly, but I saw how her stare dimmed when Ava grasped Alex's hand beneath the table. Lucy has always been a very perceptive girl, and I know she cares for Alex like a sibling. But occasionally I ponder if that emotion isn't stronger. When Ava took Alex's hand, Lucy's hand paused above her goblet, and I observed her fingers clench slightly. She said nothing. She merely dropped her head and kept eating. But that quiet was weightier than any statement. I wished to question her. I desired to grasp what was saddening her, but I realized it wasn't the proper moment. Following supper, Ava persisted in cleaning the dishes, despite my multiple refusals. "Mrs. Williams, allow me so you can relax," she stated with abundant zeal. I hesitantly consented and observed her enter the cooking area, fold her cuffs, and sing a lively melody while she tidied. I have to confess, she handled everything perfectly. The plates were orderly, arranged, and the basin gleamed. For an instant I thought, this woman appears quite attentive. But then, as I stepped into the sitting room, I saw Leo seated, shading with his small hands, gripping a marker. Ava neared and positioned herself beside him, commending him. "You shade so nicely, Leo. What's that? Show me." But Leo instantly released the marker and withdrew with a look of suspicion. as if she posed a risk. Ava glanced at me and swiftly compelled a grin, as if to mask the uncomfortable instant. "Such a timid child," she stated in the identical sugary tone, but I noticed something odd sparkle in her eyes. Alex, in the meantime, appeared unaware of anything unusual. He was occupied serving additional wine, recounting amusing stories from his job, and chuckling boisterously each time Ava shared a quip. The meeting concluded with my son fully content, escorting Ava to the exit with his gaze locked on her as though no one else existed. I remained there observing them depart with an unusual sensation in my core, as if something wasn't entirely correct. Time elapsed, and Ava slowly integrated into our existence. One weekend dawn, with the brilliant California sunlight pouring into the sitting area. Through the panes, I was weaving a neck scarf when Ava showed up, beaming widely. "Mrs. Williams, I'd like to escort Leo to the playground today. Is that all right?" she inquired, her tone brimming with eagerness. I glanced at Leo, who was on the ground playing with his timber cubes, his expression blank. "Certainly, I'm certain he'd enjoy it," I answered, compelling a grin, though I sensed a slight uncertainty within. Alex had left for his job, and I figured perhaps some outdoor air would benefit Leo. Ava took Leo's hand and guided him to the entrance while I observed them leave with an odd burden in my soul. Upon their return, Ava entered with a victorious grin. He enjoyed it immensely. He kept sliding down the chute, and he even requested more frozen treat, she narrated, her tone full of thrill. But when I looked at Leo, I noticed his top was soiled with some hardened mud marks on the azure material that I'd pressed that dawn. He was quiet with his toy vehicle in hand, without uttering a word about his trip. "Did you enjoy yourself, my child?" I inquired, bending to smooth his locks. He merely nodded faintly, averting his gaze. I desired to inquire further to understand why he was so silent, but Ava stepped in with her ever-sweet tone. "I already mentioned Mrs. Williams. He adored it." I nodded, but inwardly, a tiny fragment of the uncertainty puzzle started to assemble. On another instance, while Alex was at his job, Ava arrived without notice. I was in the cooking space preparing chili for midday meal when I overheard her speaking to Leo in the sitting room. Initially, her tone was gentle, but abruptly I caught a severe remark. "Remain still, Leo. Don't create disorder. You're grown now, but you behave like an infant." I halted abruptly, my hands still above the veggie I was slicing, and a shiver passed through my frame. I emerged from the cooking area, and immediately Ava altered her manner, turning as sugary as if nothing occurred. "Our Leo is so smart. See the high structure he constructed," she stated, indicating the timber cubes the child was toying with a bright grin. But Leo simply compressed his lips and stared at me as if seeking assistance. I attempted to grin and replied, "Yes, he's quite talented," but inwardly the discomfort was beginning to expand, like a minor spike embedding in my core. I attempted to soothe myself. Certainly, she's unfamiliar with kids. Everyone is somewhat awkward. Initially, Leo's 7th birthday is a recollection I'll never erase. Lucy, my adopted daughter, devoted the whole morning baking a cocoa cake, Leo's top choice. When she arrived with the treat and set it on the surface with its flames ignited, Leo yelled with delight. His gaze brightened for the first occasion in months. "Aunt Lucy, this is the cake I love most," he shouted, dashing to embrace her. She grinned, smoothed his locks, and said affectionately, "I prepared it for you, my dear. Enjoy plenty." I observed them with a warmed soul, sensing that the kin's spark was reignited. Ava was present too, but she merely applauded in a compelled manner, positioned in a nook with a fatigued grin. Her sole present for Leo was a detached tap on the arm and a happy birthday, kid. I observed how Leo recoiled slightly, dodging her stare, and my heart pained once more. I desired to speak up, but I remained silent, advising myself not to interfere too much. Another occasion, Alex escorted Ava and Leo to the store. I remained at home, but upon their return, I overheard Ava grumbling. In an annoyed manner, Leo let fall an entire sack of sweets at the register, and I needed to cover the cost. Such an awkward child. Alex furrowed his brow and turned to rebuke his child. "Leo, you're grown now. You must be more cautious." I observed Leo drop his head with his hands laced, and his gaze searched mine as if requesting aid. I promptly neared and placed a hand on his arm. "No worries, my child. It was merely some sweets." But inwardly, I couldn't cease pondering why Ava became so irritated so readily with a kid. Why couldn't she be as tender as Maria had been? One afternoon, when I went to collect Leo from lessons, his instructor pulled me aside and mentioned in a hushed but worried tone, "Mrs. Williams, recently Leo has been less talkative and appears quite reserved." "Is anything occurring at home?" I stiffened, but I attempted to minimize it. "I'm certain it's merely the adjustments, Mrs. Davis. No need to fret." But during the trip home, Leo pulled on my top and stated in a shaking tone, "Grandma, I don't wish to return home with Miss Ava." I halted and bent to gaze into his bright eyes, my heart compressed. "Why mention that, my dear? Miss Ava cares for you," I stated, but as I voiced it, I realized I was mistaken. Leo shook his head with resolute certainty in his stare. "No, Grandma, she doesn't care for me." I smoothed his locks, attempting to soothe him, but inwardly I couldn't refute that the child was speaking truthfully. Lucy, who was close, had overheard all. She averted her gaze in quiet, but I observed how her shoulders shifted faintly, as if she was suppressing a breath. All those scattered fragments, all those minor indications. I had noticed them, but I had opted to overlook them. And thus the occasion of my son's marriage came. That afternoon, Florida's golden sunlight poured through the vast panes, illuminating the venue in a brilliant glow, as if aiming to honor my son's joyful occasion. I was positioned at table 8 beside my grandson, Leo, and Lucy, my adopted daughter. Leo was toying with his red toy vehicle, whispering a gentle vroom vroom. I gazed at him, and my soul brimmed with affection. Lucy, in a plain beige outfit, was seated on the opposite side, bending occasionally to whisper something in Leo's ear with a grin as sweet as the dawn sunlight. "Have another tiny bit of bread, my boy," she stated, breaking off a small piece for him. I smiled at the sight, feeling a little comfort in my heart. Although our family had gone through so much pain, the presence of Lucy and Leo was always the fire that warmed my soul. Alex, my son, dressed in an elegant navy blue suit, was walking between the tables, toasting with relatives. His face was overflowing with happiness. His radiant smile seemed to want to erase the dark years that followed Maria's death. I looked at him, feeling a mix of pride and sadness. I wanted to believe that he had found a new happiness, that Ava, the dazzling bride in her beaded wedding dress, would give him a new home. But every time my gaze met Ava's, who was laughing loudly in front of the cameras, never letting go of her wine glass, I felt a small thorn digging into my heart. Her smile was too perfect, like a carefully placed mask. The soft melody of the jazz band played, blending with the lively conversations of the guests. The waiters moved discreetly, serving appetizers, crispy crackers, an aromatic cheese dip, and plates of fresh shrimp elegantly decorated. I noticed that Leo only took a cracker and then carefully pushed the shrimp plate away. I frowned and asked him in a low voice, "Don't you like this, my love?" The boy shook his head, looking away as if he were hiding something. I wanted to ask him more, but a close relative interrupted, saying cheerfully, "And Leo is behaving well, Betty. Look how big he's gotten." I smiled and replied, "He's a smart little man now." But inside, I couldn't help but worry. Leo had never refused food in such strange way. In the distance, I saw Ava's gaze turned to our table. The smile on her lips seemed to tighten for a second, just enough for no one to notice before she turned to continue toasting with another guest. I tried to dismiss my uneasiness, telling myself I was overthinking, but then everything changed in an instant. Leo, who was still playing with his toy car, pushed it too hard, and the toy rolled onto the floor. The boy quickly crouched down to pick it up, but I saw him freeze, his eyes wide, fixed on something under the table. I leaned over to ask him what was wrong when Leo pulled out a small piece of paper, folded in four, with trembling hands and a pale face. He immediately clung to my hand and whispered urgently, "Grandma, let's go. Please, let's go now." My heart started pounding as if it wanted to jump out of my chest. "What's wrong, my boy?" I asked, trying to stay calm. But Leo's panicked look prevented me from doing so. Trembling, he repeated that question. That chilled my blood. "You didn't look under the table, did you?" His words were like a cold knife. that paralyzed me. I crouched down, lifted the white tablecloth, and my eyes scanned the dark space. Under the table, the little paper was lying next to his chair, a harmless object, but full of menace. I picked it up with trembling hands, feeling the world shrink around me, leaving only Leo, me, and that damned paper. I unfolded it. The candle light was enough to read the scribbled words. Table, add shrimp to the child serving. A few words, but they were like an electric shock that ran through my entire body. I subconsciously crumpled the paper in my hand. The music, the laughter, everything around me seemed to sink into an abyss from which I couldn't escape. Ava, in her dazzling wedding dress, continued to laugh in a corner of the ballroom, raising her glass to toast with a guest, as if nothing in the world could worry her. Alex was busy taking photos with his coworkers, with a radiant smile that seemed to confirm that this was the happiest day of his life. But for me, everything in that ballroom was a farce, a curtain that hid the terrible truth I had just discovered. I squeezed the paper tightly, feeling it burn my skin. Leo, the grandson I loved more than my own life, had almost become the victim of an evil plot, right on his father's wedding day. I turned to Lucy, my adopted daughter, who was sitting next to Leo. Her eyes were filled with concern when she saw my expression. "Take care of Leo, please," I said, trying to stay calm, although I knew I couldn't hide the tremor in my voice. Lucy nodded, pulling Leo closer to her and hugging him tightly like a protective shield. "Where are you going?" she asked me in a low voice, but full of anguish. I just shook my head without answering, because I didn't even know what I was going to do next. I quickly went out into the hallway, my legs heavy as if they were carrying lead, but with my heart pounding, urging me to act. Near the bar, I saw a group of waiters chatting. Their laughter sounded like a painful contrast to the storm that was raging inside me. I recognized David, the young man who had brought the food to our table several times. He had a kind face and a friendly smile, but at that moment, I couldn't think about that. I walked straight up to him, put the paper in his face, and asked in a firm voice, "Do you know who sent this paper?" David looked at the paper, and his face changed instantly. His carefree smile turned into an expression of panic. "My God, this is my paper," he stammered, his hands trembling as if he wanted to snatch it from me. "A woman gave it to me, and I accidentally dropped it when I was carrying the tray." His words were like a ray of light in the midst of confusion, but they also agitated me even more. "Who gave it to you?" I insisted, almost shouting, completely losing my composure. David took a step back, confused. "I don't know her name, ma'am. She just told me to give it to the chef. The paper didn't say who sent it." Rage exploded inside me like a burning fire. "All the more reason," I said, getting closer, my voice trembling with anger and fear. "You know my Grandson is severely allergic to shrimp. A single piece could kill him. David turned pale, his eyes wide, with horror, and shook his head frantically. Ma'am, I really didn't know. I just followed the note. I had no idea about anything. His voice broke as if he too was trapped in this nightmare. The other waiters began to whisper among themselves, looking at each other with curiosity and concern. I squeezed the paper in my hand, feeling it burn my skin. I wanted to scream. I wanted to break everything, but I knew I couldn't let my emotions get the better of me. Leo was waiting for me, and I had to protect him. From inside the ballroom, the MC's voice cheerfully announced that they should get ready for the main course. His voice was like a cruel reminder that time was running out, and if I hesitated, a deadly trap could be waiting for Leo. I took a deep breath, trying to control the trembling in my body. I knew I couldn't stay silent. If I didn't act right now, I would never forgive myself. I returned to the ballroom with the paper still in my hand as irrefutable proof of a sinister plan. The ballroom was still, flooded with candlelight, and the music of the jazz band mixed with the laughter of the guests. The waiters silently served the main courses, and the aroma of roasted meat and gravy filled the air. But for me, everything was a farce. I looked at Leo, huddled next to Lucy, his clear eyes full of fear fixed on me, as if I were his only refuge in the middle of the storm. I took Leo's little hand, feeling his trembling fingers in my palm. And then, as if driven by an invisible force, I stood up abruptly. My voice resonated clearly and firmly above the music and conversations. One moment, please, before we begin. To eat, I have something to clarify. The whole ballroom fell silent, as if time had stopped. All eyes were on table 8, where I was standing with Leo by my side, and Lucy sitting with a spark of determination in her eyes. The clinking of glasses ceased, the murmurs died down, and I could only hear the pounding of my heart in my chest. I held up the paper. The words scribbled on it were an undeniable accusation. Who wrote this paper asking for shrimp to be added to the food of the child? At table 8, I asked, my voice trembling with indignation, but forcing it to be clear and sharp. Whispers began to be heard like small waves in a calm lake. Some guests looked at each other, shaking their heads with looks of curiosity and confusion. I felt Leo's gaze fixed on me as if he were begging me to do something to protect him. Alex ran from another table with a smile on his face that quickly turned to concern when he saw my expression. Mom, what's going on? He asked, completely bewildered. I didn't answer him immediately. I just put the paper on the table and pushed it towards him. Read it yourself, I said in a harsh voice, although inside I was a mess. Alex took the paper. His eyes scanned the words, and I saw his face turned pale and his hands tremble slightly. "What does this mean?" he asked, stunned, looking at me, and then at Leo, as if searching for a logical explanation. Ava, in her dazzling wedding dress, approached, frowning with a perfectly feigned surprise. "What is all this? Some kind of bad joke?" she said in a soft voice, but I noticed a flash of panic in her eyes. I looked at her directly. In the eyes, my heart gripped by anger and fear. "My grandson is allergic to shrimp," I said, my voice trembling with indignation. "This is not a joke. This is an attempt at murder." My words fell like thunder, plunging the ballroom into a deathly silence. Some guests' mouths dropped open in astonishment, while others began to whisper, their eyes moving from me to Ava. Ava let out a forced laugh, a mask to maintain her composure. "Excuse me, Mrs. Williams, but there is no name on the paper. Are you going to believe a story that a child who found it made up?" she said with a mocking tone, trying to make me look like a paranoid old woman. Some guests began to comment doubtfully. "Maybe it's a misunderstanding. Who would do something like that at a wedding?" The blood boiled in my veins. Ava's audacity left me almost speechless. I wanted to scream. I wanted to tear off that wedding dress to reveal the truth. But I knew I had to remain calm for Leo, for my family. Suddenly, Lucy stood up, hugging Leo tightly, her eyes reddened and fixed on Ava. "That's enough, Ava." Her voice sounded cold but full of pain, as if she couldn't contain herself any longer. Lucy stepped forward and slapped her, a smack that echoed throughout the ballroom. The dry, resounding sound broke the silence and the falsehood. Everyone froze, including me. Ava put a hand to her cheek, her eyes wide with shock, and then turned to Alex, sobbing. "You see, she's crazy with jealousy, and that's why she's attacking me. What have I done to deserve this?" Lucy didn't back down, her fists clenched and her voice broken with rage. "The only wicked person here is you. You wanted to harm an innocent child at your own wedding." Her words were like a knife that cut through the heavy air of the ballroom. The looks of doubt began to center on Ava, and I saw her freeze, her false smile fading. Alex was motionless. His gaze went from me to Lucy and Ava, as if he were trapped between two worlds. "Lucy, calm down," he said in a trembling voice, but I knew he was no longer sure who to believe. The murmurs of the guests grew like a tide that carried all eyes toward me, toward Ava, and toward Leo, my little grandson, who was trembling in Lucy's arms. Ava tried to maintain her false calm, but I saw her hands shake when she spoke. "This is a slander. I'm sure someone put that paper there to ruin our wedding." Her voice was sharp, but I noticed the panic in her eyes, as if her perfect mask was starting to crack. I couldn't stand her audacity anymore. The anger inside me exploded like a fire that consumed all my patience. I hit the table hard, making the glasses shake. "That's enough," I shouted in a voice so cold that it silenced even the music of the jazz band. "David, come here." The young waiter David approached from a corner, his face pale with fear. His eyes darted from side to side, as if he were trapped between the truth and the storm that was coming. I showed him the paper, my voice trembling but firm. "Confirm it. Is this the paper you received?" David nodded repeatedly, stammering. "Yes, ma'am, it is." A woman from the other table gave it to me, and I accidentally dropped it when I was carrying the tray. He lowered his head as if he wanted to avoid my gaze. I felt my blood boil, but I forced myself to stay calm because I knew everyone in the ballroom was watching. Ava hurried to interrupt in a sharp, almost desperate voice. "You're mistaken. I don't know anything about that." But before she could respond, a weak voice full of pain was heard from behind. Gloria, Ava's younger sister, burst into tears and stood up from her chair. "It wasn't my sister Ava who gave me that paper," the young woman said, trembling as tears ran down her cheeks. "She asked me to give it to the waiter. I swear I didn't know what was inside." A murmur of astonishment ran through the ballroom. "My God, I can't believe it. How is that possible?" I looked at Gloria, and my heart softened. She was barely 18 years old. Her eyes were red and full of confusion, as if she too was trapped in this nightmare. Ava turned abruptly and yelled at her sister, her face disfigured with anger. "Shut up, Gloria. How dare you make up lies to harm your own sister?" Her voice was sharp, but I saw her lips tremble as if she were struggling to hide the truth. Gloria backed away, trembling from head to foot, and said between sobs, "I'm not lying, sister. I just did what you asked." Her words were like a dagger that went through Ava's falsehood, leaving the entire ballroom in a state of shock. A close older relative shook his head, his voice choked. "How is it possible to not even spare an innocent child?" In the midst of the chaos, Lucy stepped forward, hugging Leo tightly, and said in an icy voice, "If you keep denying it, we can ask to check the security cameras in the ballroom. Everything will be cleared up in a moment." Her words were like a stone thrown into a lake, causing waves of panic. Ava's face turned ashen, her lips tightened, and her gaze desperately sought an escape. But there was no escape now. She didn't say another word, and that silence for me was the clearest confession of all. Alex froze, his hand trembling on Leo's shoulder, looking in horror at the woman he had just called his wife, Ava. His voice broke as if he were trying to cling to the hope that it was all a misunderstanding. But his gaze, moving from the paper to Leo, said it all. I saw how his heart broke, just like mine had when he discovered the plot. And Uncle stood up and shook his head, disgusted. "It's unbelievable. Such wickedness on a day of celebration." His voice trembled as if he were holding back his indignation. After Lucy's challenge about the security cameras, a deadly silence took over the ballroom. Ava, the woman I once tried to accept as part of my family, stood there, her face pale and her lips pressed together, looking for one last excuse. But the truth was exposed, and she had nowhere left to run. Alex, my son, walked slowly toward her, his face tense and his eyes red, and asked her, "Ava, tell me the truth. Is it true?" His voice trembled, as if he were begging for a glimmer of hope that it was all a mistake. But I knew that deep down, he also felt the painful truth. Ava took a step back, trying to force a twisted smile, but her eyes betrayed her panic. "You don't believe me," she said in a broken voice, as if trying to cling to the last drop of Alex's trust. "It's all their plan. I didn't do anything." But her words sounded weak, like a wind about to die out. Before a storm, I looked at her, my heart heavy with indignation and pain. This woman I thought would bring my son happiness was now standing in front of me like a stranger, a danger I hadn't seen before. Lucy, my adopted daughter, put a hand on Alex's shoulder and said in a voice she was holding back with all her might, "Leo almost died because of this woman." Her words were as sharp as a knife. Ava yelled desperately, "Shut up. You're just a jealous intruder." But Lucy didn't move. She was trembling with rage, but stood firm like a shield for Leo. "How dare you call me jealous?" Lucy responded in an icy voice. "Look this child in the eyes and tell me you didn't try to hurt him." Leo clung to me, his little hand squeezing mine as if he feared being dragged into that nightmare. The guests began to stand up. The festive atmosphere had completely broken. A relative of our family, Mr. Johnson, hit the table with anger. "This is a disgrace. We can't let this go." Murmurs of support were heard like waves that grew and drowned Ava in everyone's looks of contempt. Alex, trapped between truth and love, cried out, his voice broken with pain and indignation. "Leo is my son. You tried to kill my son at our own wedding." His words were like a direct stab to Ava's heart, and I saw her burst into tears. But those tears I knew were not of repentance, but of being discovered. I placed the paper on the table and declared in a firm voice, "Anyone who tries to harm my grandson will never have the right to set foot in this family." My words resonated clear and unyielding, like a sentence. Ava looked up, her eyes full of fire, but I saw defeat in her gaze. She had lost not only to me, but to the truth. The hotel security personnel approached and in a polite but firm manner asked Ava to leave the ballroom. "Ma'am, please come with us," one of them said in a cold voice. Ava backed away looking for help, but no one sided with her. Many guests shook their heads, leaving their half-empty glasses and sighing with resignation. "Unbelievable," one whispered. "How can someone be so cruel?" another said, horrified. Alex stood, motionless, his hands on his head, as if trying to keep his world from collapsing. Then, as if he no longer had the strength to stand, he slowly knelt in front of Leo, his voice choked. Son, forgive me. Forgive me, my boy, for not protecting you. I saw tears run down his cheeks, and I felt my heart break in two. I helped Alex get up, squeezing his shoulders, and said in a grave but confident voice, luckily, we stopped it in time. This false happiness has to end here and now. I looked at Ava, who was being escorted out amidst looks of contempt, and in my heart, I knew that she never was and never would be a part of this family. In the days that followed that nightmare wedding, my family was caught in a silent whirlwind where wounds still bled and unanswered questions floated in the air. I felt as if I had just woken up from a nightmare in which I almost lost Leo, my grandson, whom I love more than life itself. The story of the failed wedding spread everywhere, from the small suburban streets to the conversations of distant relatives. The house phone wouldn't stop ringing. Some blamed Alex for blindly trusting Ava. Others sympathized with Leo, the innocent child who was almost the victim of an evil plot. But for me, every call was just a painful reminder of what we had gone through. Alex became withdrawn after what happened. He was no longer the radiant man in the navy blue suite from the wedding day. Instead, he would take Leo to and from school in silence every day, his gaze filled with pain and guilt. The name Ava, like a curse, was never mentioned in the house again. I looked at Alex with a pained heart, but I knew he needed time to heal, to find himself after being betrayed by the person he loved. I didn't blame him because I understand that love can get to people, but I also knew that our family had to rise from the ashes. I continued to care for Leo as I had since Maria left. I cooked his favorite dishes like cheesy pasta or a soft pudding, trying to give him back a sense of security. But who really healed Leo's soul? It wasn't me, but Lucy, my adopted daughter. Every morning she would carefully prepare his lunch for school, carefully choosing foods without shrimp or anything that could put him in danger. She would even write a little note for the teacher explaining Leo's allergy, along with a smiling face drawn with a crayon which he loved. Aunt Lucy, you draw so well, Leo would exclaim when he opened his lunchbox, and I would see his eyes light up as if a part of his innocence had returned. Every afternoon, Lucy would take Leo to the nearby park. I used to watch them from a distance, seeing how she taught him to fly a kite, showing him how to hold the string so it would fly high. Once Leo fell off the slide, and Lucy ran to him, picked him up, brushed the dust off his clothes, and whispered, "It's okay, my love, I'm here." Leo's clear laughter echoed, a sound I thought I had lost forever, and which was now like a balm for my heart. I looked at Lucy with infinite gratitude because she was not only a sister to him, but also like a second mother, filling the void that Maria had left. One night when Leo had a high fever, I saw Lucy spend the night by his side. She sat on a chair next to the bed, placing damp cloths on his forehead, while she quietly told him the story of a brave sparrow that flew through a storm. I stood at the door watching in silence, and I realized that Alex's gaze followed Lucy for a long time. It was a complex look, full of gratitude and remorse, as if he was realizing something he had ignored for a long time. I didn't say anything. I just retreated in silence, giving them their space. But in my heart, I began to hope that maybe there was a light at the end of our family's dark tunnel. One night, during one of the rare dinners where we were all sitting together around the table with the warm pasta I had prepared, Leo suddenly looked up, his clear eyes fixed on Lucy. "I want Aunt Lucy to be my mommy," he said in a soft but clear voice, as if it were something he had been thinking about for a long time. Everyone at the table fell silent. Lucy blushed and lowered her head, gripping the spoon as if to hide her embarrassment. Alex froze with teary eyes, as if Leo's words had touched a very deep chord in his heart. I smiled. I put my hand on Alex's shoulder and said in a warm voice, "True happiness, son, doesn't come from a dazzling wedding dress, but from a sincere heart that knows how to love." Alex looked at me, then at Lucy, and I saw a small spark of hope shine in his eyes. Time passed, and Ava disappeared completely from our lives, like a toxic wind that had gone. Leo became a happy boy again, always stuck to Lucy with his red toy car and the drawing she made for him. I saw him running and playing in the yard, feeling a great relief, but also a pang of pain, thinking about everything he had to go through. One day, Alex took Lucy's hand. He suddenly stood in front of me in the living room and said in a trembling but firm voice, "Mom, I know I made a mistake. I was blind. I put Leo in danger. But this time, I don't want to let go of the person who has truly been by our family's side." Lucy lowered her head with flushed cheeks, but I saw a radiant smile on her lips. I nodded as tears silently rolled down my cheeks. "Son, the only thing I want is for you and Leo to be happy," I said in a choked voice. That night, after Leo fell asleep, I sat by the window, watching the silver moon that stretched over the quiet street. Its soft light was like a reminder that although our family had gone through dark days, light always finds a way to break through. I whispered to myself, family isn't always made of blood ties. Sometimes it's chosen with love and courage. After that grim wedding, a new chapter full of light had truly begun for my family. I looked toward the yard where the kite that Lucy and Leo had flown the day before was still there. And I knew that although the old wounds might never fully heal, we would continue on together with love and strength as our support. After going through all this, I understood something very important, that in life there are losses that cannot be replaced, betrayals that break the heart, but sincere love will always be the light that illuminates the way. Family is not only built with blood ties, but also with choices, with the courage to protect each other from darkness and danger. It is sacrifice and true affection that brings lasting happiness, not false appearances. I want everyone to remember to listen. You have to let your heart guide you, because sometimes a small gesture of attention can save a life. And it is kindness that gets us out of nights that seem to have no end. The story you have just heard has been modified in names and places to protect the identity of the people involved. We do not tell this to judge, but with the hope that someone will listen and stop to reflect. How many mothers are suffering in silence inside their own homes? I truly wonder, if you were in my place, what would you have done? Would you have chosen silence to maintain peace, or would you have dared to face everything to reclaim your own voice? I would like to know your opinion, because every story can become a candle that lights the way for others. God always blesses us, and I am sure that courage will lead us to better days. Meanwhile, on the final screen, I will leave you two of the channel's favorite stories. I am sure you will be surprised.